Good afternoon, everyone, and good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Varn Sriram with UCAN, and we are absolutely thrilled to be joined by Taylor Ward, 7th place woman at the Chicago Marathon. Taylor, big weekend for you. Congratulations. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Super excited to have you on. You took the streets of Chicago by storm. How are you feeling? How is the post-marathon buzz? How are you feeling physically?
I'm actually feeling really good. I feel like I've recovered pretty well. Of course, this next couple of weeks is really a downtime just to recover and let it sink in. But yeah, I'm very happy. I'm very excited about the result in Chicago. It was fun to walk the streets of Chicago afterwards and kind of loosen up the legs after the race. So overall, very excited, very happy about the result.
I called it a breakthrough performance, but do you feel like it was a breakthrough? Like, were you surprised you ran 2:32:43? Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was your official time, and it was a big PR for you by I think close to 3 minutes. So how do you feel when someone says it's a breakthrough performance for Taylor in Chicago? Is it something that you surprised yourself, or did you know you had this in you?
I definitely knew I had it, and if you look at my past races over the last couple of years, I've PR'd every year in the marathon. So I knew that I had it in me, and I know that it's a process. It takes time, and sometimes it's hard to be patient with that process. But my first marathon was 2:38. I had kind of a rough patch around the Olympic trials. And then in 2016, I ran 2:36, last year 2:35, and then this year 2:32. So I've definitely continued to improve, and I'm excited to see that trajectory continue in that direction. So I wouldn't say I was necessarily surprised. I had a really good build-up, good training, and I was confident in what I could do in Chicago. But, it's still a big PR is always a really good day, and it's exciting to see that work actually pay off in a race.
You are somebody, as you detailed, that you've shown consistent improvement since you ran your first marathon in 2015. Certainly want to talk to you about that and some of what you feel is key to having that steady improvement. I know that's something that a lot of folks in the audience, they're constantly striving to do, get better and better with each race. But before we really dive into your running, Taylor, let's give folks here in the audience a chance to know you a little bit as a runner. So give us a little bit of history of where it all started. How did running start for you, and what drew you to the sport, even as far back as when you started running?
Okay. Well, growing up, I always played soccer. I was a soccer player, and going into high school, they had conditioning practices in the summer, and the coach started not showing up. And the girl that I carpooled with, she was on the cross country team, and she asked if I would. She's like, "You can come run." And I said, "Well, sure. At least I'll get some kind of exercise in. I need to stay fit." And the first day that I went, they were doing a timed mile. I was a little bit nervous, but I went and I beat all the girls and half the guys, and the coaches were immediately like, "You need to do cross country." And I told them I'm a soccer player. I'm not going to do cross country, but the coaches insisted, and they said I didn't have to go to practice, just show up at the meets. And so I did that actually for 3 years in high school, where I was doing cross country and soccer in the same season. And then I started to realize that I was pretty good at running and was starting to improve and getting better at it, and eventually won state in track my junior year. And that's when I decided that was where I was going to be able to get a scholarship for college, and decided to just solely focus on running. So I ended up signing at Weber State University. I went to college there, and I did decent. I did continue to improve throughout college. My coach, Paul Pilkington, is really good at developing athletes over time. And so I got better and better throughout college. And then really I've started to do a lot better after college. I've continued to progress. And so after I finished and graduated from Weber State, I asked my coach, "What's next?" And he said, "You want to run a marathon?" And I said, "Sure." So then I moved to Alabama that summer, started training in the heat and humidity. I was by myself, but I was excited and had the goal of qualifying for the 2016 Olympic trials, and was able to accomplish that in my first marathon. I ran Houston in 2015 and was able to do that. So that kind of kickstarted my marathoning, and I absolutely love the distance. I love the training for it, and I'm very passionate about it. I'm excited to see where else I can go with it.
Now you talked, about, you were telling us how you got into running and what made you continue marathoning. Now, marathon is not the only thing you do. You're sitting currently in your office at Weber State University, where you're also an assistant professor in the Department of Radiologic Sciences. So obviously, Taylor, you have tons and tons of free time on your plate, right? No, not too much to do. But let's talk a little bit about that. So simultaneously, while you're pursuing this competitive marathon career track, you're also pursuing something that's competitive and challenging on the academic side of things. Where did that interest come from, and how have those two things worked hand in hand for you?
I've always placed a very high value on my education and my career. I was very fortunate during the program when I was going through school. I went through the radiology program, and they were willing to work with me as a student athlete. And so I just give myself a crazy schedule naturally. It's self-inflicted, but I did that all through my college career, and I've always loved my career. And then I decided to pursue my master's degree when I was in Auburn. I was living in Auburn, Alabama, but I did it through Weber State. So I'd travel across the country to go to school and finish that. And I'm currently working on my PhD at Auburn University. So I'm definitely really busy, but it's something that I feel like it makes me a whole person. And I really highly value my career. It's something that really supplements my lifestyle really well. It challenges me. I think it's something that keeps the mind sharp over time. And I really love working with the students and seeing the light bulb turn on when they understand a concept. And it's really fulfilling to me in that aspect. And I think that sometimes that's really necessary, especially when you're doing some things at a high level, whether it's working or running. I think you have to have a separation. You need to have balance in your life, because if you're only focusing on one thing, I feel like you can get really burnt out in that one thing pretty quick. So I love and value my career. My boss works with me really well. He's always been very, very supportive. In fact, on my first day on the job, he had me come into his office and he said, "Hey, running is part of who you are, and I want you to be able to pursue that, especially during this time when you have a lot of potential to really succeed." And so he's been very good about working with me and being willing to let me do both. And so I'm really appreciative for that. So shout out to Bob. Thank you.
That's awesome. And you talked a little bit about kind of how they feed off each other, like not being solely focused on running or not having to be solely focused on your career. It strikes me that a lot of people use running sort of as therapy to, stresses in life, busy job, busy family, let me go out for a run and put that aside. Now for you, there's a hyper competitive element to running as well, with what you're trying to achieve. But does it serve that same sort of therapeutic nature for you, like when things are really stressful with your academic job?
I would absolutely say so. Although I really love competing, I do at the core, I really love running. I love the training. As well as the racing. And I'm very, very competitive. I want to be the best that I can be. So I'm always pushing myself. But yeah, absolutely. The running it's my me time. It's where I get to really feel that, fulfillment from pushing myself and pushing my limits and seeing what else I can do. And so nothing feels better than, after work going and crushing a hard workout and just feeling that fulfillment, even though you're exhausted by the end of the day. It's very fulfilling. And to me, that matters more.
Let's talk a little bit about the balancing aspect of it all. A lot of times folks might look at somebody that runs really fast and say, like, of course, that's incredibly impressive, but their day is structured around also helping them run as fast as possible. For you, I'm sure there's some of that, and also you have to be creative. So talk to me a little bit about that, maybe in the situations where you've had to be creative that can be relatable to other folks in the audience that are like, hey, I'm trying to train for my marathon, but I have to get up early and go to work too. How have you had to get creative when it comes to getting the training in?
Oh, yeah, I definitely have to fit it around schedules. Where I work, we have a different schedule every week depending on which groups of students are on campus. And so not every single day is exactly the same. But I often am getting up at 5 in the morning to be able to get my morning run in before, and especially during the summer, I'll get my longer runs in the morning. So sometimes I have to get up even earlier just to fit it in and then go straight into work. I've done little runs in between in my lunch breaks before just to get it in. And sometimes I'm traveling to teach as well. So there's a lot of early mornings with that, or just, taking a quick break in between lunch, or right as soon as I'm done teaching and hurrying, getting in a run before getting back in the car and traveling. So I've definitely had to fit it in when you get it in. But something that I've really found is that if you're really passionate about something, you make it happen. It doesn't just happen. Time's not going to just present itself. You have to make the time, and you have to really plan it into your day. It has to be part of what you're planning on doing, and you have to hold yourself accountable to it. Otherwise, there's a lot of excuses that can come up, and it's just not going to get done. So you have to be willing to just stick to it and know that the time's not just going to present itself. You have to make that time.
Now, for you, as we're talking about time management, the teaching that you've been doing is something that you just started fairly recently, right? Like within the last couple of years. So I'm sure some of this has been a process, like you've been figuring it out on the fly. Despite that, you had a big breakthrough performance in Chicago. So let's just isolate it down to Chicago. Was there anything you felt like really went right this time around in terms of training? Was there anything you switched up, or did you feel like this is just a consistent build on following the plan that I've been following?
I would say it's a combination of both, actually. So I know that I had a better block than I've ever had, but it has been something that's been a gradual process. So I've, gradually increased my miles, and I feel like over this year in general, up until Chicago, I definitely had higher mileage consistently, more so than I had in the past. And I think that consistency really helped, especially with doubles and getting in just the little things. But yeah, I think with Chicago, this buildup, I just had really good workouts, and naturally it just started to get faster and faster. And so I had some of the best workouts that I've ever had, and that really boosted the confidence going into Chicago. Things that I really did focus on was nutrition. Things like making sure I'm hydrated well, recovering right, having the right carbs before and after the workouts. And I feel like that focus really did help me in my training. But it's all a combination of little things. You can go to 0 to 100 and think that you need to be at 100 right away, but it's really just those little steps that gradually build up and get you to that level that you're aiming for.
You mentioned nutrition as one of the things that that has worked well for you, and I wanted to chat with you about this kind of from two different angles. So first, let's just talk about, like, as you built up to the marathon over the last couple of years, coming from what you were used to doing from a running standpoint. Like, what were some of the big overall challenges you faced nutritionally when you became a consistent marathoner, where you're like, oh wow, I have got to figure this out now?
Yeah. A lot of it was learning how to just the timing of when to eat and the nutrition. So having the right amount and figuring out what kind of carbs and what kind of things I like to have before a hard effort or before a race. And then I really feel like the biggest thing was actually recovery, just having the protein right after a hard effort or after a hard race. I feel like that really boosts the recovery, and you're able to recover faster, and then you can keep building and move on to the next thing. So really just the timing of when to eat and what you're eating at those times was something that it takes some time to figure out how to dial it in and what works for you, because not everybody's body is different. And so everybody, handles different foods and different nutrition differently. So you have to kind of find what works for you specifically and build on that. And that's something that you would never do differently in a race. You would always just practice it in training first before applying it to a race.
Now, for you specifically, when you talk about timing, that's an issue. I'm glad you brought that up. That's something that you hear time and time again for runners. Was the timing for you something you needed to figure out in terms of what can I eat to help me last through the entire workout? Was it more about what can I eat that sits well in my stomach, or was it, frankly, a little bit of both?
I'd say it's a little bit of both. You want to have something that's going to sustain you so you have energy throughout. But also something that doesn't make you feel like you're too full or gives you GI issues. That's going to interfere with the workout as well, or the race.
So something, Taylor, that you've had a good degree of success with for the last couple of years has been UCAN, for that pre and post phase nutritionally that you were talking about. How did UCAN come on your radar? Like, do you remember how you heard about it? What intrigued you about it? Why you wanted to give it a try?
Yeah, I actually did the New Haven 20K a couple of years ago, and they had a rep that came and talked, and they explained, UCAN and the product and the backstory behind it. But as a medical professional, I really liked and understood the science behind it. And I was like, that's exactly what I need for marathoning, something that's long sustained energy that doesn't spike your blood sugar and is able to sustain energy over a long period of time, and it breaks down slowly in the body. So that really stood out to me. And I didn't try it race day because I never do anything new on race day, but they gave us sample packs and I started using it after that. And I was really impressed with the product. I really started using it before hard efforts and using the protein for recovery. And I was like, this is exactly what I need with my training. So then I ended up contacting UCAN and eventually getting on with you guys, which I'm really grateful. So thank you. But it's been a very important and very significant part of my training and my nutritional plans.
So I appreciate you kind of sharing how you first heard about it. That's interesting. I didn't know that you first learned about it at the New Haven 20K. But in terms of that whole timing and timing your carbohydrates and kind of consuming the right types of carbohydrates for training, like in marathon training or even for the race on Chicago, like how's an example of how you would use UCAN and sort of in your mind, the why behind it when you're talking about it for a pre-workout fuel source?
Yeah, I usually before a marathon, is that what you mean?
Yeah, either before marathons or even like before like a long run, So if there's a difference between how you might use it on race day compared to a long run, I'd love to hear that. Or if it's kind of just the same overall, that's great too.
Yeah, I pretty much do it the same. I try and simulate my training with what I would be doing in a race. So that way when race day comes, it feels like it's a normal thing. But typically I'll do the super starch. I love the orange flavor or the cran raz, but I'll usually mix that up and be sipping on that within the hour and a half to hour before I start the workout, before I start the race. And I feel like that does enough for me to give me the energy that I need. And then after the race, right after, I'll have that protein right after to help the recovery process get started.
That's great, Taylor. It's one of the things that's interesting is another athlete just recently joined our team. Sarah Seller is actually a college teammate and a training partner of yours, and somebody you told about UCAN, a while back. So I'm curious. Runners obviously talk to each other, share tips with each other with training partners. That's the beauty of the sport. When you talk about UCAN to other training buddies, somebody like Sarah, like how do you describe it? What's the way you talk about it to other runners?
Well, I always tell them that, it's been a huge part of my training. For example, with Sarah, I had told her about it and we talk pretty often. So I was telling her that I was using it and I really liked it. And actually when she ran her first marathon in Huntsville, I actually had finished a long run. So I had some of my own and I gave her some after she finished her race. So I was like, you need this right now. So shared it with her. And then same thing, when I've had other runners that are around, like if they're at my house and we finish a long run, I'll share it with them so they can try it and see if they like it. And I'm like, I love this. These are my favorite flavors. They have a lot of other flavors too, but it's something that I feel has really helped me. And, we want to build each other up. We want to help each other get better. That's something that's, really nice about the world of running is you want to support each other. So, I've definitely shared it with others that ask me about it. So, because it's a product that I really feel like I can stand behind and has worked for me. So I truly and genuinely, can advocate for it.
Well, we appreciate that very much. And actually where you started going at the end of that answer leads perfectly into what I wanted to talk to you about next. So you kind of talked about the support of other runners, others in the community, building each other up. As you've gone through this experience over the last couple of years, as you start, seeing really big improvement, are there any people, that you've leaned on or even are there any people that you kind of looked up to as you were coming up and running saying like, oh, that person is kind of how I want to do it? Just curious if there's any role models in the sport or anybody you've kind of found that has really inspired you as you've gone on this journey.
I've got a lot of really good role models. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of great people that I've been able to associate with. During college, Lindsay Anderson, she's a 2008 Olympian for the steeplechase. She was helping with the team, and so we got to know each other really well. And for me, I was like, that's amazing. I'm getting to run every day with an Olympian. And actually, when I moved to Auburn, Alabama, I got to run with Amy Rudolph Carroll, and she is such a good role model. She was someone that I could ask, a lot of questions about her experience and just her progress throughout her career. And she's someone that I really, really look up to. She's definitely my hero. But it's really fun to see, the differences between all the people. I have a lot of role models that I haven't met or have at least maybe seen at races, but haven't had a chance to talk to. And I love to, read their blogs or see their posts and just kind of see what they're doing, because something that my coach has always said is you want to mimic greatness. Look at something that someone's doing and what's working well for them. And, everyone's a little bit different, but kind of mimic what they're doing right and apply it to your training. Because, again, you want to build off of each other and get better. But I definitely have a lot of good role models. And especially in the world of American marathoning right now, we have a lot of really amazing women. And so it's really exciting to see that. And it's fun to, see everybody doing so well, and to really look up to them is really fun.
I was going to ask you that. It's quite a time right now in the world of American distance running. What's it like being at some of these big races and lining up at the start line and kind of looking around you like, wow, there's a lot of really, really talented runners here. It must be, I got to think as a competitor, it like really gets the juices flowing. And at the same time, there might be some nerves there.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's always nerves no matter who's there. But I love having the chance to be there with those amazing runners. And as I've kind of touched on earlier, it is a process. I have to be patient with my personal progression, but it's exciting to be there and to learn from them and to observe the things that they do and maybe what works well, and to just be there on the starting line with them is exciting. So, it just makes me want to push myself more and to continue to get closer and better like they are.
So moving forward, Taylor, obviously Chicago just happened, and I want to give you plenty of time to enjoy this. You deserve it. But has your performance in Chicago changed your thought process about what, life in running is moving forward for you? Or was this something that's just like this gradual build? Like you're like, hey, I'm improving each time, and this is just the progression of where I want it to be. Did Chicago change your thinking about your own potential as a runner in any way?
I think a little bit. It's definitely another step in the right direction, and I feel like it's a significant step. It's something that's getting me closer and closer to where I'm ultimately wanting to get. And so I think that I'm just really positive. I want to see what other races, and we haven't really decided. I've talked to my coach a little bit, but we haven't decided exactly what's next. But it definitely gives me a lot of confidence in going into these future races and setting more big goals, because I'm definitely not done here.
Once you start to creep, closer and closer towards that 2:30 and even below, the natural thing on fans of the sport's minds is like, oh, is she an Olympic contender? Is that something that you've allowed to enter your, like, are you somebody that growing up was like the Olympics were a dream of mine? You hear that a lot, or is that something that now as you get better and better, suddenly those dreams just start to change?
No, I have always had that dream, and I think most runners definitely have. But it's something that before didn't quite seem as close to a reality. And I know that I still got a long ways to go, but it's something that I'm definitely working towards, and, that would be a dream come true. But I also know that, you're only entitled to the work. You're only entitled to work as hard as you can. And you're not always entitled to those, no one deserves it, if you know what I mean. Like, you're entitled to work for it, but you never know what's going to happen on that day or at the Olympic trials. And it is a progress. It's something that I enjoy the process, and I'm going to do everything that I can to reach those goals. And then, see where it takes me from there. But growing up, I was always inspired by the Olympics. I always wanted to do that. Was a dream of mine. And I remember my dad actually had said, well, if you want to go to the Olympics, you're going to have to eat, sleep, drink, poop, running. That's all you're going to have to do. And you're going to have to eat broccoli. And, as a kid, I was very intimidated by that, because I'm like, that's a little bit intimidating. That's a lot. And I don't like broccoli. But but actually, I love broccoli now. So I guess I'm on the right track there. But yeah, it's something that over time has, as I've kind of continued to progress, it becomes more of a reality. It's getting closer and closer to actually being something that's possible.
So if you want to run like Taylor, eat your broccoli. That's a big, big takeaway. But no, I love that answer. I mean, that's a great that's a great perspective. You know, there's certain things that could become dreams, but they become closer to reality. Like the more and more you can achieve, and the more you work hard. Taylor, we've got you for about another 5 or 10 minutes here. Really appreciate you taking some time. And for those in the audience, if you do have any questions for Taylor, feel free to chat them to us, and I can ask them to her. But in the meantime, I got a few more for you. So this weekend, you know, we talked a lot about this past weekend in Chicago. What's the proudest moment for you in your running career thus far? What's a race or a moment that you look back on and kind of look at it as something really significant to help you get to where you are today? Put you on the spot. That's a tough one.
Yeah, there's a lot of significant races that I would say have kind of, again, it's a process, and something that I really liked. I heard one time was Nick Simmons. He had a video of some kind that had talked about progress is like a ladder, and you have to hit every rung of that ladder. And some people will skip a couple rungs, but then eventually they're going to have to come back and hit every rung. And I've really liked that. And I feel like that's definitely been my life. It's been, you know, a slow, steady progress, but it still is going upward and moving in the right direction. In high school, I won state, and that's what got attention from colleges. And so I feel like that was kind of the first step for me in being able to go and run at a collegiate level at a D1 school. Later on throughout college, I gained my confidence. Eventually, my senior year, I won the Big Sky Conference 10K, and that was exciting. Then the following year, going and qualifying for the Olympic trials, that was really significant for me in my first ever marathon. I feel like that was another big step in the right direction. When I don't know, I'm honestly very, very happy with the race at Chicago, because I feel like I put together a really good block of training going into it. I was really confident, and throughout the race, I just continued to move. I feel like I was in a good space mentally and physically, and I feel like I really left everything out there, but still have more in the tank. A lot of lessons to be learned from that race. So it's been a progress. There's a lot of races that I'm really proud of. I'm definitely really high on Chicago right now, but there's a lot to be learned from every race, honestly.
I got to think, as a runner, that's super exciting too. What you said about Chicago, you know, like feeling like you left everything out there, but also you had a great close in Chicago, were charging hard at the end, and can finish the race feeling like I left it all out there, but I still potentially have more to give next time around. So I got to think that's got to be super satisfying.
Yeah.
Well, we have a couple questions from folks in the audience, Taylor. So let's end here. So the first one comes from Christy, and Christy wants to know, how do you feel the confidence you have gained through running has helped you in the rest of your life? So some of this we talked about sort of off the start, but anything you can add to that?
Hi, Christy. I would say that running definitely gives me confidence in the other aspects of my life. I think that being able to push myself physically and being able to accomplish goals is something that can be applied in every aspect of your life, you know, whether it's with your family or whether it's with work or academics. I think it's something that can be applied, and those lessons can be applied to all aspects of life. So I feel like when I'm doing well in my running, I'm doing well in everything else in my life. And just knowing that you can push yourself harder than you actually think you can, and being able to go past your expectations really gives the confidence that you need throughout the rest of the day. And just honestly being, you know, healthy. When your body's happy, even if it's tired, everything else kind of seems to fall into place too, and you're able to function better, whether it's at work or school or with your family.
Great. Thanks so much for the question, Christy. We got one more from Samantha. So Samantha says, hi, Taylor. I've been following your career. Congrats on a great performance in Chicago. I'm hoping to run Chicago next year. You've run it twice. Do you have any specific tips for training for Chicago?
Hi, Samantha. Thank you. For Chicago, it is a flat course. They do have a mini hill at mile 26, so it feels a lot bigger at 26, but it is fast. So in the buildup, I would recommend, you know, making sure that you're planning with your fluids. I've run it when it's hot, and I've also run it when it was rainy. So I've had different conditions there. It kind of depends on the year, but your training block is going to be during the summer, building up to that. So there's going to be a lot of early mornings, but I recommend, just making sure that you're, good on your fluids and just getting that routine in. The course itself is awesome. The crowd is amazing. They're going to be there lined the whole way. You're going to love it. Chicago does a very good job of putting on a great event. But yeah, I would just really focus during the summer and just get the miles in and practice. You want to practice similar to how the race is going to be. So it is flat, so you may want to find some flat surfaces where you can just roll and just work on your pacing.
Thank you, Samantha, for the question. We've got two more for you, Taylor. So this one comes from Jim. Jim says, you mentioned recovery being something that's very important. What do you like to do in the days or the week following a marathon to recover?
Hi, Jim. I am very serious about my recovery. I do take the protein right after the race, but throughout the week after, me and my husband actually joke, we call it Fat Week, where you can indulge a little bit, not excessively, but do some of the things that you maybe have been holding off a little bit. I really focus on getting good, nutritious food after the race, making sure that I'm refueling right away. And throughout the weeks afterwards, you want to make sure you're really hydrating, because I feel like hydration is huge in keeping the muscles from getting too sore and too stiff. So I do a lot of hydration. I make sure I'm getting enough rest, but having really nutrient-dense foods helps with the recovery, along with maybe some treats.
And Taylor, when do you usually go on your first run after a marathon? Like, are you running even lightly at all this week?
It depends on how the recovery goes and how you're feeling. I did my first little shakeout yesterday. So this week will be really low key, just getting some shakeout runs, kind of feeling how the legs are, nothing hard for the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I've had where I've taken, a whole week off or a couple of weeks off, and it just kind of depends on the race, on how much you bonked or how much it took out of you. But I feel like over time, I've recovered better and better after each marathon, and maybe that's just the body adapting to doing that kind of a race. But I think you have to play it by ear and not do too much too soon. And
a shakeout run, like for you yesterday, were we talking a few miles, 3 or 4 miles, half an hour, a little bit longer than that?
No, I did like 20 to 30 minutes, just a few miles.
Awesome. I know that's one that we commonly get of, like, when should I start doing stuff again after a marathon? So it's great to hear it from someone like yourself. Well, that is all the questions we have. I really want to thank you, Taylor, for joining us. It's fantastic to get your insight. Really excited for you. Really excited for the big breakthroughs you've seen, and it sounds like there could be more ahead. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us. Big thanks to Taylor Ward. This is not the first time you're going to see her on here with us. So thanks so much, Taylor. Thanks for your time. Congrats on a great experience. Really hope you're enjoying it all, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. You can check out this full conversation on our Facebook page just here in a couple minutes. We'll have the whole video up so you can catch all of Taylor's wisdom. And thanks to everyone. We'll see you next time.